Hi guys, Ricky Pope here, and today on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, I talk with Scott Bayles, author of Holy Heroes of the Bible, and Justin Holman, the illustrator of the book, plus scripture and nerdy news, and we'll get to all of that right after this. 2022 is flying by so fast, and I just reviewed my goals for the year. It's not too late to set some effective goals for 2022 for yourself. And the Goal Process 101 ebook helps you do just that. With a straightforward process and practical exercises, you'll be guided to set the right goals for you and set out a plan to achieve them. Get your copy of the Goal Process 101 ebook by going to goalprocess101.com. Use CNU2022 at checkout to save 10%. Now, back to the show. Today on the show, I interview author Scott Bayles and illustrator Justin Holman about their new book, Holy Heroes of the Bible, a superhero geek's guide to become a hero of God. And along the way, we get to know a little more about Scott and Justin, and some of the surprising things they've been involved in. But before we get to that, let's read some scripture and do some nerdy news. Just one passage today, 1 Samuel 17, 45 through 51. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David, triumphant over the Philistine, with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran away. Now, let's get to some nerdy news. The Batman is now available on streaming services and is currently free to watch for those with a subscription to HBO Max. I'm going to be giving my spoiler review of The Batman next week on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, and hopefully we'll have a special guest. Marvel has finally released a teaser trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder this week. The trailer focuses heavily on Thor Odin's son and what appears to be his journey to becoming his old heroic self again. From hanging with the Guardians of the Galaxy, Korg, even what appears to be Olympus with Russell Crowe as Zeus. We get a view of Valkyrie in her new position as the leader of Asgard, and finally a quick glimpse of Natalie Portman's Jane Foster as Mighty Thor. Does this mean Jane Foster will not be as big a part of the film as we had been led to believe? We'll have to wait and see. Marvel Multiverse role-playing game playtest comes out this week, with the all-new 616 game system that only requires 3 six-sided dice. Christian Nerds Unite is partnering with some other great podcasts to do a set of real play bonus episodes. You don't want to miss this. More about that in the coming weeks. Keep your ears open. The Hollywood Reporter has confirmed Napoleon Dynamite filmmaker Jared Hess will direct the new Minecraft movie under the Warner Brothers umbrella. It will be starring Jason Momoa. With the success of other game-based movies lately, like Sonic, Free Guy, and Uncharted, Mojang's Minecraft could be hitting the screens at just the right time. Now let's get to our interview with Scott and Justin about holy heroes of the Bible. You can tell they've really poured themselves into this project and wanted to see lives change. Scott, Justin, it is great to have you on the podcast today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Well, Scott, you have a new book out. You've been on the show previously to talk about a devotion that you did before. So you have a whole new book out called Holy Heroes of the Bible. And now this is a little bit different than the previous book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and about who Scott is?
All right. Well, I am a pastor and author, a husband, a father, a comic book nerd, superhero fan, and martial arts teacher. We can leave that one for another discussion. But I have been a huge fan of Marvel and DC superheroes since I was a kid. And I started writing about the link and connection between superheroes and spirituality, faith and Christianity and the Bible. Several years ago, I want to say it was back in 2014 when I first started working on it. The first book that I wrote was simply titled Holy Heroes, the Gospel According to DC and Marvel. And in that book, I look at 18 different superheroes from Marvel and DC and kind of dive into their stories and draw spiritual lessons from them. And of course, look at various scriptures that connect to those stories. And so it's all about finding the moral and spiritual lesson within the character. And then after that, I wrote a devotional, 40-day devotional that did the same thing, just kind of expounded on those same ideas. And this new book, Holy Heroes of the Bible, kind of flips that the other direction. And it looks at 18 different heroes of the Bible, ranging from Moses to Noah to David to Esther, etc. And then I also incorporated illustrations and parallels to comic book superheroes, but the spotlight is on those actual real Bible heroes and the lessons we learn from their stories and the examples that they set for us.
Awesome. And Justin, you were speaking of those illustrations and the artwork. Justin, you were the artist for the book, correct?
Yes.
So how did you get involved in art and in working in books and connecting with Scott?
Well, I have always loved comic books. I think my passion originally from falling in love with fiction in general started with Ninja Turtles, probably for me. Started real young, and I wanted to draw Ninja Turtles, and then I obviously, Batman and everything else came into the picture soon after, and I began to love comic books, and I started drawing a lot whenever I was in high school, and I focused a lot on drawing, a lot on learning illustration then. And I've always loved to draw. I became a professional inker around 2003, 2004. I started inking comic books for Marvel and Zenoscope. But I've always, I've always loved just creating stuff myself too, rather than, just inking over other awesome artist stuff. I also love drawing myself, and I'm a Christian as well. So, the opportunity came, I believe it was maybe sometime in August last year. Scott got a hold of me at a convention and brought up the idea of possibly doing a book together. And I was just so excited. I was like, yeah, let's do it. It sounds like an awesome idea.
Awesome. Now, Scott, you mentioned that this book it's different than some of the others in that this one focuses specifically on the characters of the Bible. And tell us a little bit about why you chose to go this particular route this time.
Well, I always kind of had, after finishing the first book, I thought that this was kind of the natural progression, to look at some real heroes. And I actually addressed that in the introduction of the book. I talk about how there's so many different lessons and moral values we can learn from the stories of superheroes. But as real people, especially real Christians, we need to have real heroes too. You know, people that we can look at that said, hey, this is what they did in real life. You know, they were in this situation and this is how they overcame, or this is how they relied on God, things like that. And so by looking at the heroes from the Bible, we could say, you know, this is what real people can do in ordinary situations or extraordinary situations, and this is how God can use them.
What's one particular what's one of the sections that you think is kind of the most impactful in the book?
Well, it's really hard to say.
I know they're all your babies, so
they're my favorite. No. So I cover all of the people come from the Old Testament. You know, it starts with Noah and goes chronologically up through the Old Testament. But of course, the first one is actually God himself. And I think that was the one I may have enjoyed writing the most, because it looks at Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, which is the creation, and then kind of zeroing in on his relationship with Adam and Eve, and then the fall. And so I looked at those 3 chapters as kind of introducing us to who God is. And from that drew comparisons to, you know, these are how some various superheroes have been inspired by these stories, and even have like a personal hero. One of my personal heroes is Dan Jurgens. He's the writer and artist on DC Comics. He did Superman for the better part of 40 years. And I talk about how the fact that this is like my absolute favorite comic book artist and writer, and yet I've never met him. In all the conventions I've gone to, I've never had a chance to meet him. And just kind of contrasted that with God and how he made himself relatively available immediately to Adam and Eve to know and to have a personal relationship, and how he does that with us too. And so we sometimes have these heroes that we never meet in real life. And even if you do meet them in real life, maybe they don't live up to your expectations. But then we have this one incredible hero, unparalleled hero, who knows us better than we know ourselves and invites us to know him too. I would say that was probably, at least for me, and I love the fact that it was the first chapter because I enjoyed writing it so much, and then I'm like, that motivated me to keep writing the rest of it.
Awesome. Well, Justin, as you were going through illustrating some of these great illustrations in the book, what was kind of your inspiration for the style you wanted to have in this?
Starting on each character specifically, just sitting down and just reviewing the story of each character, and just kind of getting a feeling of what the attitude of that character is, in my mind at least. You know, we can all perceive something different in each one, because they're so deep, you know, and intricate. But you know, I would sit down and go over, you know, Bible verses, and just kind of look at the whole story, and just say, I only get one picture to depict this character, and that's really hard. So and Scott and I worked really well together, just kind of going back and forth, saying, I'd send him, you know, thumbnails of a character, you know, 3 or 4, and say, you know, are we close with any of these? You know, does one of these, you know, kind of spark something in your heart? And almost every time, the one that he picked that he liked was the one I was leaning towards using. And so it really God just really helped us out a lot with it, helped me out a lot with it, you know, because there was a couple of scenes, you know, there was about 18 illustrations, but I'd say about 5 or 6 of them, I I don't know how I got them. I just started doing it, and I had this idea in my head, and it just came out beautiful. And I think it caught that character in the best light that I could depict him.
Awesome. Well, Scott, how did you start on this journey of? Now I know you love comic books and you love superheroes and you love God, but how did you get into this idea of let's blend the two? When did that come about for you?
Well, I owe that in large part to a good friend of mine, Santino Morini, who passed away actually just a year or so ago. And he and I met we just kind of traveled in the same convention circles. You know, like we didn't know each other in ordinary life or anything, but we would see each other at the same cons, specifically the Superman celebration in Metropolis. There was the second year, I think, that we met each other there. He sparked up conversations with me, and he's an outgoing, personable guy. And so he would try to make friends with people that he didn't know, which is the opposite of me. You know, I would avoid talking to people that I don't know most of the time. But we got to know each other just a little bit, and you know, he discovered that I was a pastor and he's a Christian, so we had that in common, and we would talk about that on occasion. And then one day he just called me and he said, "Do you ever feel like, you know, we should be using our, you know, cosplaying and fandom to glorify God in some way?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. What did you have in mind?" And so that sparked this conversation where we just brainstormed for a while, and eventually we came up with this ministry that we call Costumers for Christ. And so his family and my family were all into cosplay. You know, he loved to dress as Batman. I would do Superman. I'd be Captain America. He would be Thor. And we would have, you know, my kids, his wife, my wife. We all got into it. And over time, we kind of recruited a few more families and individuals to join us in that ministry. But what we would do is we would go to the conventions and we would cosplay just like we normally would, but we would get a table there. And we would use that space to give out free information literature to point people to Jesus. And so my early chapters from the first book that I wrote started off as pamphlets that we would give out, just like short devotional pamphlets. And then we ended up creating our own comic book, Jesus Christ, the World's Greatest Superhero, which is really just a kid-friendly 22-page retelling of the story of Jesus. Fast-paced and colorful. And we give these away for free at all the conventions that we go to. We give away those devotional pamphlets still. Sometimes we have stickers and coloring pages and other stuff like that. And we try to strike up conversations with people in the least confrontational way that we can. One of the blessings of doing the ministry the way that we do it is just being there in costume invites people to come to us. You know, so we're not like this weird pushy cult group that's standing there by the door trying to, you know, get you to take a Bible or something like that. We're minding our own business, standing at our booth, and they will come to us and engage with us because maybe their kids want a picture with us in costume, or they just want to, you know, meet Batman or whoever happens to be there. And my son does a fantastic Spider-Man, and he is just so outgoing and engaging with the kids. They'll all just kind of crowd around whenever he's there. And that just gives us that opportunity to say, "Hey, would you like a free comic book?" And if they look at it and they're like, "Oh, that's kind of neat," and they ask questions, then we can kind of engage from there. And so that ministry really taught me that, you know, there is a strong link, or at least there can be if you want there to be, between superheroes and Christ, and between comic conventions and Christianity. And so it just kind of built on that.
Very cool. So I have to ask this question because you're a pastor. What does your congregation think about you dressing up as Captain America and going off to some comic convention for the weekend?
Well, they put up with me. I get teased a lot from some of the other guys that are around my age and stuff like that for being, you know, running around in spandex and that sort of stuff. And I get to joke about it from the pulpit too. I preach actually at the most unlikely place considering my other interests and things like that. But I preach at a small rural congregation in Illinois. And so we're surrounded by fields and cows and stuff like that out here. We have just about 100 people in the church on any given Sunday, and a lot of them have silver hair. And so I am kind of an oddball. You know, most of the other guys are into hunting and fishing, and I'm into comic books and spandex. And so it's interesting, but they, you know, they love me and they've always been fantastic to me. They knew, in fact, I told them about this ministry when I first started at this church, and they're like, okay, we'll see how that goes. And it's been 12 years now, and we're still doing it, and the congregation is still putting up with me. And I have actually preached in costume a couple of times over the years too.
Awesome. I bet that was interesting.
That was fun. It was fun for me, and I think for everybody else watching too.
And I have worked in those. I was a worship pastor for 15 years, so I have worked in those silver-haired churches before, leading big choirs and things like that. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and now I have the silver hair, so I'm becoming one. Well, Justin, when you started working in comic books and you started doing inking, how did is putting your faith into that art form for you? Is that something you've always wanted to find an outlet for, or did you always have a way to do that, to mix those two together?
Well, I honestly think that I honestly haven't ever tried too hard to fit it into my talents, because I consider my talents God-given. And you know, as long as what I'm doing, I'm working is I'm doing to the best of my ability, I know that it's glorifying God. That's not in juxtaposition to what Scott just said regarding, you know, how can we glorify God by, you know, our costumes, because I do believe that has its place. It's just that whenever, you know, say for example, whenever I was inking with Marvel, you know, you only get these small little chances of sharing your faith, and sometimes within communities like that, or the secular communities, you know, because I mean, it's not due to fear or not wanting to bring it up. It's just that, you know, there's only certain times that you're able to do that. You know what I mean? Because it's not like I was the writer or anything. I was just the guy making sure that the penciler looked real clean, and you know what I mean? So I think more than anything, it's just about having a good attitude and being Christ-like. Regarding anything, to be honest, whether it's, you know, me inking or drawing or doing whatever. So that's just always been my kind of where my heart is. Just whatever I do the best of my abilities that God's given me, and that in itself is a good testimony of being a Christian.
Awesome. Well, Scott, with you've got this one under your belt. This is your third book, and so do you have plans for another installment? Are you going to move on to the church fathers or something like that?
No, it's funny. I kept telling myself this will be the last Holy Heroes type book. This will be the last geeky superhero book that I write. But then I keep having ideas for more. So I can't say this is going to be the last one. I've been working on a devotional specifically about Superman. So the Superman devotional, which he was my first big superhero. You know, that was the one that I loved as a kid growing up with Superman. So I have more Superman comics than I do anything else, and more history with that character. And so it's really easy to draw parallels between Superman and Jesus, and others have done that, you know, tremendously as well. So that's one that I've been thinking about. And then also because this book focuses almost exclusively on Old Testament figures and characters, with the exception of Jesus, who is kind of the bridge between the old and the new. I've thought about doing maybe a heroes and villains book where I focus on some of the bad guys as well and use some of the New Testament heroes and their stories. And so, yeah, I guess possibilities are endless and they're out there.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think there's definitely room for it. I think there's room for it. I think there's an audience for it. If I didn't think there was an audience for it, I wouldn't be doing this podcast, honestly. Uh, I, I definitely think there's an audience for it, and I would encourage you to continue on it. So now I just want to briefly talk about this because Justin, you have another interesting part of your previous life that got you involved in some interesting Marvel related items. You want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, so a few years before I became an inker for Marvel, I actually was signed to Epic Records, and I was in an alternative rock band called Revis. About when I was 20 years old, I moved out to Los Angeles with my band. You know, the common dream that everyone has: let's go to Los Angeles and make it big. But we actually got signed, and we recorded an album with Don Gilmore. He's recorded like Linkin Park, you know, a bunch of Eve Six, a bunch of big bands. He recorded our album. It's called Places for Breathing. This was in 2003, which later on was on the Daredevil album, or the Daredevil movie soundtrack album. And I got a gold record out of it, so that was pretty sweet. It's got dust in my closet somewhere though, sadly. um,
I can tell you're really proud.
well, you know what? You know what? I was so excited. I was so excited to because I was a comic book fan even when I was, you know, in the because it was a secular music, you know, scene. But I
Oh yeah,
was still very excited because I loved comic books even still, you know, like I said. And then and I hadn't seen the movie until like 5 years after it came out because I was just so busy. And then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, I don't know.
do I
I'm being
really want to admit I did this?
I'm being really honest with you. No, but I am proud of it. Because the music's great, and it was a blessing to be a part of the pop culture, which holds that, even though it holds it by a very frail string. It's still there, and so I am very proud of the accomplishment because not many people can say that. Um, and I still do music today. I'm a worship pastor as well, at a local church here. So you know, I still get to do music, and draw and do everything I love. God's blessed me tremendously. But yeah, I was in a rock band and we made it big. And I toured. I even toured with Pearl Jam. You know, I toured with some big bands.
Nice.
But you know what? Then I found Jesus and kind of the importance of my name being big compared to just being, you know, loving God and loving people, that trumped it. You know, that took over. And so I don't really care anymore, you know, about that. Even though I'm, like I said, I am proud of it, but I'm not. That's not my goal anymore, you know.
Understand. Well, Scott shared a little bit earlier that Superman is definitely his favorite superhero. So I'm going to ask you, Justin, what is your favorite superhero? And I'm going to guess it's not Daredevil.
I, oh man, not Ben Affleck. Terrible. No, I'm kidding. I would have to say that it's Batman. And I would say that probably more to do with Michael Keaton and that era of movies, as my kind of inspiration. And that and Batman animated was just for me was just I thought it was just stellar. I thought it was just wonderful and kind of it captured the darkness of Batman, but you know the broodiness of it. But at the same time, it had the funny parts in it. You know, the humor, Mark Hamill as Joker, stuff like that. I think that's probably my favorite superhero is Batman because he's human
Aw,
too. You know? He has to be creative.
awesome. Well, Scott, just before we go, let me just ask you this real quick. You have made connections with a lot of superheroes over, over the course of these books. Is there one superhero that you haven't really fit into your stories yet that you really wish you had?
Hmm. Wow, that's a good question. There are some that have been a struggle to fit in. Like got one about Daredevil, or not Daredevil. Sorry, now I've got Daredevil in my head. Deadpool is what I was going to say. Got one about Deadpool that was fun to write, and I turned a few heads when I told people that I had a chapter in my book about Deadpool and the spiritual lessons we can learn from his life. Gosh, there are a ton more comic book superheroes that I would love to touch on that I maybe haven't yet. Worries about, like, maybe Nick Fury, or let's see, man, I'm trying to think. I keep thinking of one and I'm like, nope, I did one on that in the devotional. That was the nice thing about writing the devotional, was that it was 40 days, 40 different superheroes. And so I could touch on all these. There's so many random ones in there, like Booster Gold. I haven't done one on Blue Beetle. I'd like to get Blue Beetle in there sometime.
Yeah.
I've got Captain Marvel, like the original, Shazam, Captain Marvel, and so many others. Man, as soon as we're off, I'll probably think of like a dozen more that I've.
Well, you and I think we mentioned this off air, because you mentioned the X-Men episode that I did a few weeks ago. Did you get the opportunity to use the story of Nightcrawler in any of the books so far?
Yes, that was actually in the very first book that I did, Holy Heroes, the Gospel according to DC and Marvel. And I've got a chapter in there about the X-Men. And I focus on that particular episode because as a kid, that episode stood out to me. And even going back as an adult, I'm like, this story is about Nightcrawler and his faith in God, and Nightcrawler, in essence, leading Wolverine back to faith in God. And it ends with Wolverine in a church reading scripture and praying. I'm just like, I don't think that would ever be aired today. But the lessons from that stuck out, and so I included that as one of the chapters in my book, kind of an analysis of that, and how Nightcrawler's faith, even though he had every reason to kind of reject God. I mean, people were mean to him, they hated him, he looked like a demon. He had every reason not to have faith, but he found faith because the monks or whatever it was at this one particular abbey reached out to him and showed him the love of God and love of Jesus. And so that's how he came to faith. And then he speaks so lovingly about God throughout that episode. And, it's one of the things that we need to be as the church. Like, we need to follow that example. We need to be reaching out to people who maybe don't look like they belong in church, and just sharing God's love with them, because you never know the impact that's going to have on them and the impact they'll have on someone else. Man, that was an awesome episode.
It definitely was. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being on. Real quick, if anyone wants to kind of keep up with you guys, where can they connect with you online?
It's really easy to find me if you just Google Scott Bayles. You'll find a variety of different places. But you can go to holyheroes.org. That's my blog where I kind of post some of the content from the books. And you can always reach out to me on Facebook or on YouTube. I have a channel called Creative Costuming and another channel called Holy Heroes. You can find those.
Awesome. And Justin, is there anywhere online that we can kind of keep up with you?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram at Justin Holman Rocks. You can also send me a friend request on Facebook. My wife and I have an account. It's called Justin and the letter N Ali Ali Holman. Love to you can message me on there. No big deal. I'm not better than anybody else. So I don't care if, people, if I get too many friend requests, then wow, that's a good problem. But yeah, you can just get a hold of me there or on Instagram. I'm always on one or the other, and I'm always doing something goofy.
Awesome. Well, and I'll put links down below in the show notes, as well as links to where you can buy the new book, Holy Heroes. I'm going to butcher the name of the book again. Holy Heroes of the Bible. I don't know why I have so much trouble with the name of this book for some reason, but I will definitely put that in the show notes down below. It is so great to have both of you on the show. Anything else to share before we go?
No, I'm just really appreciative of you having us on. It's been so much fun. I enjoy your podcast, and I'm blessed to be here.
Really appreciate it.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great getting to hear Scott and Justin share about their book, Holy Heroes of the Bible. I hope you'll consider grabbing your own copy. I put a link down in the show notes so you can buy it. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click all those buttons down there. That way you can keep up with us and you'll be informed when there's new content released. And you can find all of our social links and links to our YouTube channel and our online store at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. And while you're there, click on the support tab. We would love to have you as a Patreon. Before we go, I do want to leave you with this blessing from Jude. To him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you before his glorious presence without fault and with great joy, to the only God, our Savior, be glory, majesty, power, and authority through Jesus Christ our Lord before all ages, now and forevermore. Amen. We'll see you next week. Blessings.